Okay, Erev Tov, everybody. Pleasure to welcome Rabbi Joel Finkelstein, who we go back to our days in Yeshiva University. We won't say exactly how long ago that was. And Rabbi Finkelstein was the rabbi. I remember him as the assistant rabbi in the Spanish-Portuguese shul in New York, and he's been in Memphis since 1997, already 23 years. So that already tells you something about him. That's very nice, and it's a pleasure to welcome him. He's very involved in the community in Memphis, teaching his shiurim all over the place, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to Torah in Motion, and we look forward to hearing about Chet HaMeraglim. I think that's the topic for this evening.
Yes.
Unless you want to move to Israel before Shabbos, in which case you can hear her Korach. I don't know which is worse or better. Okay.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Kelman. A pleasure. Nice to reconnect with Rabbi Jay, and nice to be back in Toronto. It was last summer, I think it was 2 summers ago. I was in Toronto for the first time in my life, and really very impressed with the whole community, and very impressed with all the work that Rabbi Jay Kelman's been doing there. And it's great to be here, and thanks for having us, and thanks for joining us. Our topic for tonight is the Chet HaMeraglim, the sin of the spies, as the linchpin of the book of Bamidbar. I believe that when you look at anything in Bamidbar, I call it Bimidbar. Look at anything in Bamidbar, you have to see it in the broader context, because it's a very highly crafted book. So are all books, but I think there's something special. One of my favorite is Book of Bamidbar. And if we want to appreciate what that sin is, we need to look at the whole book. There's also always been a lot of discussion. What is the sin of the Chet HaMeraglim, the sin of the spies? I mean, after all, they were told to check the land, see if it was good. They saw it, they didn't like it. So what do you expect from them? So there's always a big question about it in general. But rather than just trying to answer it in the abstract, or just by zeroing in on the Parsha, I want to zero out on the whole book and make some major observations about the book itself. When we want to understand what a book is about, we need to look at trends, keywords, ebbs and flows, light motifs. Let's take a look at a number of motifs that emerge, which will tell us about a number of different ways of looking at this book. And with each view of the book, we will go back and say, how is the Chet HaMeraglim, the sin of the spies, a linchpin to understanding the whole book, and what's its role in that? So I'm going to share a screen with you, and we'll go from there. Okay. All right, Jay, let me know if there's any problem with the sharing. Thank you. All right. So we ask, what is Sefer Bamidbar all about, and how do Shlach and the sin of the spies fit into it, and what is the sin of the spies? So we'll start with approach number 1. It's a book of Hashem's providence. There's not tremendous proof to this, but certainly you might argue that the encampments in Bamidbar is all about trying to be part of God's camp. And you might argue that the centerpiece of the whole book, the high point, the apex of the entire experience of Bamidbar, was Vayiben Saron Vayom Moshe Kuma Hashem, or Kuma Hashem, Yafutzu Oyevecha V'yanusu Misanecha Mipanecha. That when they saw the Holy Ark, the center of our entire Mishkan and the entire camp, the enemies would run like crazy. The plan was bloodless war. We march in, God is seen, everyone runs away. We walk in, we take over all the vilot, and everything's great. If indeed this is the epicenter of the whole book, is this idea that God is with us as we march, as we march forward in our war, then we can understand that the sin of the spies, I'm sorry, a little cut off here, is Hashem itanu al tiraum. The Kalev and Yoshua, the good guys, they say to the people, God is with us. Have no fear. Don't be afraid of those people. Hashem itanu, God is with us. So the sin of the spies is not recognize that God is with him, and the whole 3 parshiot of the book were all about showing that Hashem is Bekerev Machanecha, Hashem is in the midst of your camp, and Hashem is with you as you march forward. So that perhaps is one way of looking at the book of Bamidbar. It's the book of God's presence as he marches with the Jewish people, and the Jews marched away from God eventually, and the sin of the spies is how the Jews don't appreciate that God is with us. Approach number 1. Approach number 2. think we got this expression from Aviva Zornberg, I'm sure has been one of your speakers over the years. The book of desire. You can find a lot of evidence to it. You can bring some midrash evidence, but let's look at the expressions that are last week's Parsha, the epicenter of last week's Parsha, with the Kivot HaTava, the burial place, the burial of desire, the burial of desire. He took desire, put it in the coffin, and buried it. The Jews, hitavu tava, they desired a desire. Or you have very passionate people there. You have two people, those in the Pesach Sheni, those who were impure, who said, Lama nigara, why should we be any less than anybody else? Everybody else brought the Korban Pesach, what about us? And then the Benot Slavchad, who said, Lama nigara, the same two words, why should we be any less than anyone else? It's a book of passion and desire. Before everything fell apart, we had the impure people who didn't want to lose out on the Korban Pesach. They were passionate, they had desire. At the end of the book, we have the Benot Slavchad who desired the land of Israel. And in the middle, the linchpin, where we really lose our desire, is not just the Kivot HaTava, where the people desired the wrong desire, but the sin of the spies. Now, the word desire doesn't appear there, but as described in Devarim, the summary of the whole experience of the sin of the spies is, Below avitem la'alot, you refused to go. You didn't want to go. You didn't desire to go. Now, if you look at it more broadly, let's look at it like this. We'll start from the top. In Hebrew translation, take a look. Rashi says, why does God count them at the beginning? Why is God always counting the Jews in Bamidbar? It's a book of counting. Because it's not about counting, it's a book of numbers. Right? It's a terrible name for a book. Right? You fall asleep when you say, we're going to have class about the book of numbers. People fall asleep. Sounds like a terrible book. It's not a very good cover. What if we explain Rashi says, well, God loves them so much, he's always counting them, like your money. You always want to count it. So you say, Midrash, what are you talking about? No, Rashi gets to the essence of the book right away in the first line. It's a book of God's desire for us, our desire for him. The flags. What are the flags? They really have flags? Each camp stood on a flag. The flag. So the Midrash says, "Diglo alai hava." It's a symbol of the Song of Songs. We love God. We encamp around God. We're so proud to encamp around God. And you say, really? What does that got to do with flags, love? But if you look at it in the broader context, maybe that's the whole book. The whole book is about how we love God. God loves us. He's counting us. We love God. We're proud to be marching around God. And then you have those desire. Every single tribe, they were all, each tribe was interested in getting involved. They also wanted to bring gifts to the Mishkan. In Parsha Naso, that boring section where you keep saying over and again, say next tribe brought the exact same thing, but they're excited, they're involved. And then the people who were impure said, why should we be left out? But then things tank. And they desire to desire they shouldn't desire. And then the Jews didn't desire to go to Israel. And then even, you might say, even the sin of Korach is a very Bamidbar-like sin. I asked Rabbi Kelman to bring me next week about Korach, but no, he wanted to bring me this week, so I'll throw it in anyway. That Korach, it's a very Bamidbar sin. Why? They said, come on, everybody's holy. We want to get it on the act too. Of course, they're a bunch of phonies. They didn't mean it, but the words they use are the words of desire. We also want to be involved. It's a rebellion of the masses who said, we want to be Kohanim too. We want to be as leaders. So they're a bunch of phonies. They're a bunch of fakers. That it's like most revolutions that it fizzles like nothing. I hope the current revolution will amount to something good, not like most revolutions. But they desired something. Zimri is about illicit desire. Zimri, the sin of immorality in public in front of Moshe and Aaron, the end of Balak, the beginning of Pinchas, a sin of desire. And Pinchas is the hero of this book. If you invite me back for Pinchas, I'll be glad to talk about it. But Pinchas is the hero of the book because he's got this huge desire. He's got a passion. Kanoe kinati. He's zealous for God. And similarly, they had to destroy Midian, the same idea. The Komnik Midian, they had to revenge them. And the Benot Slavchad, they're the heroes, the crown of the book. And we'll talk about their friends, the other people from Menashe. They want to be part of everything. They desire to be part of the enterprise. So good. We have a book of desire. And how, if the book is all about desire, how is the sin of the spies a linchpin? Because they didn't have any desire. They lost all desire. They were depressed. We can't do it. We started crying. We're never going to make it. The people are too big. We're too small. They had no desire to go. I found a little motif. Maybe I should have left it out, but it was too good not to mention. Just very briefly, I also found a key word, perhaps, in this book is eyes. And maybe it relates to desire. Maybe it relates to our next theme. We know that the leaders of leaders are known as Einei Haida. It's a midrashic idea. It's a Vayikra idea. Einei Haida. It's not found in this book. However, Moshe says something which a lot of people at Gush think is a very key line. Vayita lanu leinayim. Before everything fell apart in last week's Parsha, they started sinning like crazy. Moshe said, Yitro, come on, you come with us. You'll be our eyes. Not supposed to say that. God is leading us with the clouds. The trumpets are blowing by the Kohanim to tell us where to go and when to go. And he told Yitro, he should be our eyes. And then this Parsha is very visual. You have to see the land if it's any good. They said, they showed us to see, they helped other people see the fruits, and they had the wrong impression from the seeing. And of course, the Parsha ends with tzitzit. Lo taturach levavchem v'acharei einechem. Don't stray after your heart or your eyes. And later, next week's Parsha, Heinei anashim nofel glu yanayim. There are other references to eyes. And the terrible sin of Zimri is done, Leinei Moshe, to the eyes of Moshe, even though he's supposed to be the leader. So I wanted to mention that it relates a bit to our theme of desire, eyes. You desire things of the eyes. Just a leitmotif, and that theme is found within the sin of the spies as well. But let's go on. But Einayim also relates to the leadership, and that we'll be getting back to that later. The other idea is that this is a national book. It's about the whole nation. Of course, all books are about the Jews, but some books may focus on the Levitical aspect of it. It may focus on your personal, personal honesty, like your holiness. You should personally be holy. You should love your neighbor. You shouldn't commit acts of immorality. But this book is very much about sort of a national sin. And if Tamir Granot, one of the scholars at Machon Herzog, said this sin is the watershed moment in the book, well, let's take a look. What was the national project of which Bamidbar spoke? It actually doesn't say. It's very interesting. If you look at Bamidbar, there's a camp. What's the point of the camp? You have people you're supposed to count, but why? Only of a certain age, why? It's not clear. Well, if the Ramban is right, that they're getting ready to go to Israel, it's the army. So Bamidbar, Nasa, and Balocha are all about going to Israel until Vayihi ben Soharon, until they actually started marching and they're ready to go to Israel. If the whole book is a national project, going to our national homeland, going to Israel, then we can understand something about other national things. We have 2 Levite dedications. We all know that the Levites were dedicated to the switching of the 5 shekel, the Levites with the firstborn. But there's another one in last week's part where they lifted the Levites up and they waved them around like a lulav. Why two dedications? Because one, they're lifted up by the Jews, by Aaron representing the Jews. Why do we have to send everyone out of the camp? It's about setting up a national homeland that is free from miscreants like the Sota or the husband who falsely accused the Sota. Either one doesn't belong, or perhaps a Nazarite removes himself from the community. Those who steal, it's about setting up a national project.
Can I do it this one? Okay.
Okay. Now, if we ask, what are the main sins in each book? In Shemot, what's the main sin, of course? Golden calf. Vayikra, the main sin is Nadav and Avihu. Each book has its own sort of original sin. And Bamidbar, it's all about our national aspiration. So it's not about our religious aspiration. It's about our more nationalistic aspiration, if we can separate the two. It's not about our individuals who sin. It's about the national failure. And that is that they nationally, collectively failed to go to Israel. Devarim, of course, is about going to Israel because it's on the cusp of going to Israel. And they're the lead-off sin. The The lead-off discussion in Devarim is sin of the spies. So if it's a book about Israel, our national project, then the sin is a rejection of Israel. As it describes in Tehillim 106, there's a historical Tehillim. It describes our Jewish history, very instructive. A lot about Bamidbar there. Vayimasu be'eretz chemda. In this whole Parsha, in 3 words, they despised the treasured land. Vayimasu be'eretz chemda. It's a rejection of the land of Israel. Where does it say that in the Parsha itself? It says, your children who you thought would die in the desert, I'll bring them to Israel 40 years from now, and they will know the land that you despised, you rejected. Ma'astem, you viewed it with disdain. That's the sin of the Golden Calf. It's a national project. It's about embracing the national heritage of the land of Israel, and they rejected it. Motzi'ei dibat haaretz, ra'ah. Who are the spies in 4 words? They're the people who slander falsehoods against the land of Israel. It was a disgrace against the land of Israel. That Rashi, that this Parsha is about slander, as was the end of last week's Parsha with Miriam, but slander specifically against the land of Israel. So we have the idea it's a national problem. It's a national book. And we have the idea of eyes. Eyes relates to leaders. Another idea is that this is a book of leadership. It's a book about what the leadership should be. Often people think that the Torah has little to say about administration. The Torah is not interested in government, and it doesn't really tell you enough, really, about hilchot melachim, how to run a country. But in some ways, it does set up some sort of a structure. There was an idea that the very first words of Bamidbar are "V'itchem yiyu ish ish lamateh." There were supposed to be nesiim, tribal leaders. So when we read the tribal leaders, we fall asleep, we start talking to our friend if we weren't socially distanced from them. But the truth is that the Bamidbar is very interested in tribal leaders. It mentions that Nachshon ben Aminadav, Netanel ben Zuar, Eliyav ben Chilon, it mentions those guys 4 times. 4 times we have to listen to a list of those people. At the end of the Torah, it tells us again, the Rashi Matot, it gives us the list of them again when they're going to go to Israel. So they're listed 5 times in the book. So if the main idea, and if the key word in this whole book is nisiim, nasi, now watch, follow me through the Parsha. The leaders are listed 4 times. One of them is how they each gave sacrifices on different days, 12 days. In Shlach, you know who the spies are? Kol nasi bahem. They're not the original guys we know and love, Nachshon ben Aminadav, Netanel ben Zuar, Eliyav ben Chilon, but they are also nasiim. They are leaders. And the sin, it's a sin of leadership. It's a sin of leadership. Korach, Nisiei Edah, also a sin of leadership. The Korach people were leaders. Datan v'Aviram. Zimri, the great sinner who committed the sexual act, Nasi Beit Av Shimoni, he was a Nasi. The Benot Tzlofchad case is adjudicated in front of Moshe, Aaron, Elazar, and Nisiim. Structure of government suggested by the book of Bamidbar is Moshe, Kohen, Elazar, and Nisiim, the 12 representative leaders from each tribe. There was to be a leader, a representative of every tribe. It was like a parliament. And at the end of the book, as things straighten out, the Benot Tzlofchad is adjudicated in front of Nisiim. The Parsha Matot is the only Parsha addressed to Rashi HaMatot, to the heads of the tribes, the staffs. Midian, they had problems. We sinned, we didn't take the right things, we didn't kill the right people. It's adjudicated by the Nisiim. The Ruvain Gad, as they approach Moshe and Elazar, they also approach the Nisiim. In Parshat Maseh, we learn the names of the new Nisiim. And the case of Menashe versus Benot Tzlofchad, don't forget, it's not only the daughters of Tzlofchad said, we want to have a portion of the land. The Menashe said, whoa, we want to have a nice portion of land, one that's not pocked with different little cantons of other tribes who married into our tribe. That case was also adjudicated in front of the Nisiim. Take a look, check it out. Every case, the end of the book, adjudicated in front of Nisiim. The Nisiim system failed at the beginning. It failed deeply in Shlach. It failed deeply in Korach. They were the sinners. It comes to a low point with Zimri, who was himself a great sinner and a tribal leader, and it worked beautifully for the rest of the book as things improve. So it's a leadership book. It's a leadership. From that perspective, what is the sin of Shlach? The sin of the spies is a sin of leadership. It's a failure in the leadership, and it relates to Einayim, the eyes, because the eyes of the book, the eyes of the nation are the leaders. So it also relates perhaps to that theme as well. I'd like to suggest something else, that it's a philosophical problem. This, you won't hear this elsewhere. The philosophical problem. What do you mean? Well, there's another motif that we find, the word tov, good. Tovu lecha Yaakov in the book in Balak, which we're not spending much time on tonight. There's also a lot of tovs over there. Tov l'varech Yisrael, goodness. If you look at the end, before everything falls apart in Balotcha last week, before all the sinning began, it says that Moshe turned to Chovav, who may be Jethro, who may be Jethro's father, and he said to him, "We're coming to the land that you say you're going to give us. L'cha itanu, come with us. Ve'itavnu lach, we'll make things good for you. Ki Hashem diber tov al Yisrael, because God spoke good things about Israel." And then he says, "No, I don't want to go. I'm going home." So he says, "No." 3 times he says tov. If you come with us, ayat tovahu, the goodness, shall ye that God will make good for us. Eitavnu lach, will make good for you. The word tov just appeared 5 times in one conversation. Major theme in this book is the idea that God is good. God is trying to do good for Yisrael. And don't forget, halalu of the Avodah. We worshipped idols 5 minutes ago in Egypt. Look in Yechezkel, he tells you all about it. But it doesn't matter. God was going to do good things for Israel. It's a book of love of God for the Jewish people. But then what happened? What did the people say in reaction to the spies? Hello, tov lanu ashuv mitzrayim. You know what would be good? Going back to Egypt. In other words, what's everything that we have here? Ra. B'nei Moshe Ra, everything was bad. There are other, the Jews were complaining, Ra b'nei Hashem. They were complaining about bad. What is a complaint that God took us to the desert to die? It means that God is bad. Bera'ah hotziam, as it says in Shemot, not here, that God took us out of badness because God is a bad God. It's a theological problem, a huge theological problem, one which Moshe said, God, you can't allow that. But it's a notion that God does not mean good for us. What did the good spies say? That's, of course, Yoshua and Kalev. The land which we went to, Tovah haaretz mod mod. It's very, very good. What does that remind us of? Audience participation. The land is very, very good. Where does Tov Ma'od appear in Tanakh prior to this? Aside from Rabbi J, of course. Right? So maybe it's obvious, right? That
It's there. It's in the chat box.
Okay. In the chat box. Great. Let's take a look.
Great.
The chat box. There we go.
Yeah.
We got some chatters. And they say Breshit creation. Correct. In other words, the whole what God is telling us at the very beginning of creation is no small thing. God saw it was good. Okay, it's good. And then he was very good. Okay. The idea is God created a good world. That is God made the world straight. It's an important theological principle, and the good spies tried to affirm that, but the community did not get that, did not follow that. In Dvarim, they say it explicitly. It's because God hates us, he took us out of Egypt. The Netziv says they knew God, they knew they would inherit the land, but they thought that first God wanted to kill these people. as he eventually did. But he wanted to kill them even before they sinned, because Hador hazeh saneh ki chashvu ki et zeh Hador saneh. They thought that this generation he can't stand. So it was a misimpression about their relationship with God. They thought they were hated by God. It was, why did they have lack of self-confidence? They thought they were hated. They had reason to think that. They were sinners. Before they brought the Korban Pesach, they probably hadn't done a mitzvah in their life. It's very possible. But it's still wrong. God was going to do good. Hashem diber tov al Yisrael. Moshe told Jethro the important secret that we don't hear from anybody else. God is trying to do good stuff for us. So we have this theme of goodness, and it's a philosophical problem that the Jews thought God meant bad, and this is the ultimate sin where they attribute bad to God. We said it's a book of leadership, so that makes it sound like it's like a top-heavy, that you're supposed to have these tribal leaders. That's true. It's one of the major themes. It's one of the key words, Nisiim. They're all over the place. You can't miss them. Wherever you turn, there's Nisiim. But one might argue that that very sentence that introduces Nisiim is really also about grassroots. Because it says, Itchem you, when you, Moshe and Aaron, you count the Jews, the beginning of Bamidbar. With you should be a man for each tribe, one man for the head of each of the house of the fathers, there should be. In other words, there should be a Nasi with you wherever you go, whatever you do, bring the Nasiim with you. In some ways, it's about having a tribunal of leadership, some sort of a parliament of sorts, representative government, but it's also about, it's the Amcha, it represents the grassroots from the bottom. So if you look at it that way, that the idea of this book is not just that they have to have good leaders, and it was a failure, Parsha Shlach and Korach are failure of the Nasiim. Those very people who were supposed to lead, they led us to sin. Not just that, but it's supposed to be grassroots. So then you say, have an answer to an interesting question. A question which I'm afraid my colleagues at Yeshivat Har Etzion, of which I'm an alumnus, they have an approach to this which I do not appreciate and I agree with. When the people said, let's go back to Egypt. That Moshe and Aaron fell on their face. We can show this in Korach. We can show it in Pinchas. We can show it in Shlach. The leaders, Moshe and Aaron fell on their face. So from this, you have a theory, which I'd rather not even mention, but it's out there, that Moshe is a failed leader. Moshe fails in the book of Bamidbar. He's replaced by Yoshua because his time is up because he keeps falling on his face. Of course, many Meforshim say that he falls on his face, he's praying, he's not just doing nothing. But I want to argue something else. What did we say this book was about? Grassroots involvement. I mean that every tribe has to have its involvement. All right, every person you can't have a democracy where everybody runs the government. You can't have we'll all show up to Washington every time they want to change the plumbing in Washington. No, you have represented by the represent a democratic sense of a grassroots sort of movement. So it's all about everybody getting involved. When everybody goes nuts, when nobody's doing anything, they're waiting for the promise. The promise of this book is with you will be other people. The tribes will be with you. Moshe didn't sign up to do it by himself. He's right in Parshat Balotcha. Did I bear them? I'm supposed to carry them like a baby? No, this is supposed to be a grassroots movement. And I don't accept the idea that I am the sole leader. So they fell on their faces and said, well, we're waiting. You ever see the teacher, he says, I am waiting for the class to get back into order. That's what they're doing. We fall on our faces. We are waiting for leadership to emerge. So you say, that's insanity. The leader is abdicating. You can't just wait for leadership to emerge. Did leadership emerge when they fell on their faces? When did leadership emerge when they fell on their faces? I'll check my old chats. When did leadership emerge despite the fact that they fell on their faces? All right, seeing none. They fell on their faces They didn't do anything. They were crying. That's a sign of giving up. It's like the spies. And Pinchas emerged. And you know why that is such an exciting moment? Which if Rabbi Kelman would invite me back for Pinchas, then I would explain it more deeply and in depth. But Pinchas is the hero of this book because Pinchas saves that grassroots movement that was supposed to be there. The leaders tried, but people, there was supposed to be a people that he wasn't carrying them like a baby. Then you have something. The reason they fall on their faces is because we're not in charge of this. If there ain't no grass movement, we're out. We're not here to be the movement. There has to be a people that we lead, and they have to take charge. And Pinchas represents that amcha that the Sfas Emes actually says that he has the same exact theory. I was zeicha to think of the same exact. He says Pinchas had to be nobody. Rashi says he wasn't really a Kohen. Why was that necessary? His father was going, his grandfather was going. Sounds like a bad joke. He had to be nobody because the role was for nobody to stand up and do something. For somebody who's a nobody, who's not special, to stand up and do something. And then God made Pinchas special. He gave him a blessing that you're also a Kohen. Pinchas represents every man. It's supposed to be a book in which every man, today we would say every person is supposed to be involved. So it's a book about everyone getting involved. From that perspective, what's the sin of the spies? It's about everybody's crying. Everybody gave up. Everybody believes in the spies, the bad spies. It's not only a sin of leadership, it's also at the grassroots level. They all started to cry. God says, that's it. You'll be crying on Tisha B'Av for 2,000 years, 3,000 years. Because it was a failure of the nation as a whole. They fell for it. And they were supposed to be part of the grassroots movement. Instead, the grassroots fell apart. All Baloscha, Shlach, Korach, it's all about the Amcha either being quiet, not saying anything, or about the Amcha totally falling apart. When is the book at its best, at its peak? Pesach Sheni, when people want to get involved. Who are they? We don't know. We don't know their names. Siraj could be, Bnei El Tzafan, there could be certain people. We could try to find their names. But it doesn't say who they are because it doesn't matter, because we don't want leaders with famous names. We want Amcha, plain folk, to say we want to have a Korban Pesach. Who's Pinchas? Nobody. He's some grandson. He emerges as someone who takes Benot Slavchad. Just women, yes, women emerge as involved. That's good. That means everybody's involved, men, women. And Nisiyim, of course, whenever the Nisiyim are involved, as I explained at the end of the book, they adjudicate all the cases. Then things are cracking, things are doing great. If Moshe could have lived a few more days, he was doing great at the end of the book. Nobody died. Everybody was great. If you invite me back for Matzot Masa, I'll explain all about it. Okay, moving along. So now, everyone's so used to looking at the COVID trend. It's going up, it's going down. In Toronto, is it going up or down?
Down. It's going a little down, thank God. Yes.
Yeah, thank God. We never had too many, so unfortunately it's going up. But it's all relative. So we need to look at the book and the trends. So we have the following. Bamidbar, things were doing great, but they were getting better and better till Balotcha, when the people said, wow, we want to be part of the Korban Pesach. It's terrific. Everything was great. They were going to march to the land of Israel. Balotcha's thing began to fall as they began to complain, as Moshe complains, people complain, Moshe complains, Miriam slanders, and then Shlach. Now in this configuration, Shlach is not the low point. It's the linchpin, but not the low point. It's the linchpin because if it's a national book, this is the national crisis, because this is where they lose the right to conquer Israel. But in terms of how low do you go, this is not the lowest moment. I don't know if you can see the right side of the screen. I don't know how. Yeah, you can. But it goes lower, and Korach is worse, as I'll show in a moment. Chukat is great. They actually conquer land of Israel. They conquer land in Transjordan in Chukat. And Pinchas goes to the lowest point in the book. Even though, again, the trend was going up. They were starting stage one of opening up of the coronavirus right here in Parsha Chukat. But then they had it, like they did in Memphis, we stopped going to stage one. They closed everything up again when Pinchas went down at that sin of Zimri. And then from then on, as Pinchas emerges as an Amcha guy, as one of the heroes of the Amcha, of the masses, everything goes up. And again, the first apex, we have Lama Nigara, why should we be any less? And as we go up toward the final apex of Matot Maseh, it says Lama Nigara. And by the way, the book ends, Moshe doesn't die. Moshe does great. At the end of this book, he's got Nesiim behind him. And when he's got Nesiim, he's powerful. He does great in this book. Everything's terrific. And now, crime and punishment. You didn't think you were reading that book tonight, but we are going to take a look at that. Of all the different cases, you can try to see, where is the apex and where is the zenith and where is the low point of this book. So if we look, we have mitonanim. They were complainers. There was a fire that hit them at the edges. What do the edges mean? Rashi, it's either the grassroots or the leaders, because it's either a grassroots book or a leadership book. And mitonanim was an affront to one of them. It's also a problem of desire. Right? They desired. And certainly that's Afsuf, the Erev, the converts, the false converts, they were hit, they were smitten with a very deep plague. And certainly that was a problem of desire. Hitavu ta'ava, it says they desired a desire. Miriam is also a sin. Now Moshe also has a sin, but he wasn't punished. He was punished in a different book. So we won't talk about that. Miriam has a sin and she's punished with leprosy. That's a leadership sin, punishment. The spies is a national, the spies die right then and there, and everybody else dies the next 40 years. Rashi says nobody died under 60 years old, right? Because it's particularly tragic to die under 60. So nobody died under 60, but the spies died right away. So the leadership died right away. That was their punishment. And the national condemnation to wander 40 years was a national condemnation. So nothing here is really at the national level. That's why this, from a national perspective, if that's the theme of the book, then the spies are at the epicenter, because that's the only place where the cardinal sin happens that ruins the whole thing. In Vayikra was Rabbi. In Shemot it was the Egel Hazav. But here it's the spies, which ruins the whole national project, the whole project of the book. In Korach, the Korach and family were swallowed up, and the other people, the 250 people, were burnt, and that was a leadership problem. But he had a lot of passion, by the way. And post Korach, again, I'm going to switch my moving this to over here. In post Korach, you may not have noticed, but people sometimes overlook it, but Korach wasn't that bad. After Korach was swallowed up, the people said, "You killed everybody." They told Moshe, "Okay, you destroyed your enemy, but by the way, you killed everybody." And God says, "That's it, I'm finished." And the people start dying. A different story, but 14,700 die. That was a grassroots problem. The masses were complaining. It wasn't a leadership problem. So the Korach has two parts, the leadership part and the grassroots. Zimri was an eye problem. He saw those women. It was a desire problem, passion problem, and is also a leadership problem. So notice how everything sort of ties into all the different themes. But you have to admit that in terms of punishment, it's like that chart we had before. It's Pinchas that's the worst, because the death toll is twice as high, almost. So there's no question about that. So, said a lot of different stuff. So let's sort of try to bring it together. So what is this book, and what is the sin of the spies, and what's the antidote to the sin of the spies or the problem of this book? So we said it's a book of Hashem's providence. Problem was that the God wasn't with you. We have an antidote to that, to think about it, whether at some point the Jews realized that God was with them. I don't know. Book of desire, it says you didn't desire. Lo avitem, you didn't want to go up. It's a book of desire. It's about passionate people and not passionate people. And this is, what's the sin? A total lack of passion. A book of God's love. That's what it's supposed to be. Rashi told us that the counting, the galim, the flags, was all about God's love, and we thought God hated us. Who knew? A national book. We despise the treasured national homeland. And then the book is solved, and the book concludes by people from Menashe who said, "That's very nice to have women's rights, but we're not going to concede any land to their husbands. So we want land." Oh, you want land? That's the opposite of the spies, isn't it? The people of Menashe and Benot Tzlafchad are the opposite of the spies. spies didn't want land; they could care less. And the people of Menashe on whom the book ends Bnot Safchad, whom the book sort of ends, they wanted land. It's a book of Eretz Yisrael. They didn't want to go, but in the end, it was solved. We did conquer. In the end of the book, we do conquer lots of stuff. That's why there was a question of Reuven and Gad wanted to divvy up the land, but it's a leadership book. The leaders fail, and in this Parsha, with the spies, the leaders failed. The leaders rebelled, and then at the end of the book, the leaders took the lead. The Nesiim are back in full force, something they were not at the beginning. The beginning of the book is supposed to be so ideal, but not really. It's only maybe in Parsha Naso when they brought sacrifices. But we really see the Nesiim in action at the end of the book. The end of the book ends better than the beginning of the book. Maybe in that sense, the chart needs to go all the way up at the top, higher than Balotcha. In the end, it gets to a place from a leadership perspective that's higher than Balotcha. It's a book of grassroots. In addition to leadership, and the masses rebelled. The masses accepted what the leadership said, but then when the grassroots demand a role, and Pinchas, Mr. Nobody, saves the day, that is the antidote to the problem. So that's a lot of stuff. So how do you put it all together? What's the message of Shlach within Bamidbar? So I would say just two things. The Musar Haskell, the lessons learned are, number one, get involved. If we want to have a successful nation, people have to get involved. Whether it just means longing for it, desiring it, right? Sometimes we can do a lot by saying Hatikva, by crying when we read about something bad that happens in Israel, by showing our passion for Israel, for Torah, for yeshiva, for the shul, for the rabbi. We can do a lot of things that show our desire and love it and long for it and desire it, or sometimes actually getting involved or leading, rising up from the masses and doing something, taking a leadership role like a Pinchas. Number two, second idea which emerges very deeply from this book, I would say is the lesson of this book, that God is with us even if we are sinful. So you say, well, where does that come out? Well, by even Zoron, God was supposed to be in our midst. That's 3 parshas that describe that God was in the center, physically and spiritually. And then he was supposed to march us into Israel because he was with us, and everybody would see that God is with us and would scatter. We wouldn't have to kill anybody. And then where do we see that God is with us even when we're sinful? Balak. You see, Balak doesn't talk about Balak much, did I? Because Balak is like, it's a change of scenery. Balak is in the non-Jewish country. But from Balak, from over there in Transjordan, we learn that God loves us. That even when we're so bad, in a book full of sins, if somebody wants to curse the Jews, why can't he? You want to say the Jews are bad, right? Some Christians over the centuries have said that the Jews are stiff-necked. And look in the Bible, it says right there. So how can you argue? I mean, after all, the Jews are stiff-necked. So what does Balak say? The story of Bilam says, even though the Jews are so miserable in this book, you can't curse the Jews. God still loves them. It's amazing. God is with us even if we're sinful. So sometimes, we live in that era where we say, in this generation, God finally, after 2,000 years, God solved our national problem. In this generation, we're the ones who deserve to suddenly have the land of Israel in our possession. Are we the chosen ones? How could this be? It must be just a random sort of thing. It can't have any theological purpose. God chose us. Are you serious? How odd of God to choose the Jews? And the answer in this book is clear. The answer is that God loves us even if we sin. Even if it's not the best generation that ever was. Maybe it is. I don't know. Who knows? Nobody knows. Nobody knows who's righteous, who's not righteous. We don't have a Geiger counter of religiosity, as Rabbi Lichtenstein once said. But even if you would say that we're not the most righteous generation, God can love the most unrighteous generation. He can love us nonetheless. So these are the lessons of the book. These are the themes that emerge. Some are leitmotifs. Some are major themes. Some emerge from the language, from the keywords milot manchot, as they say in Hebrew, words that guide. And I believe that overall, the book is a call to action. It's a call for leadership at a more grassroots level, at a more grassroots love and desire. And that desire is the key thing, and anxiousness to do things. We have to very seriously consider, when women or other people say that they want more action, they want more activity, want to be more involved. Listen very carefully to that. People who want to get involved, listen very carefully. In a shul, they say, you go to a board meeting and someone says, yeah, I know. Well, the problem with this shul is this. And they start complaining. You say, that's the person you have to listen to. Someone's disgruntled, listen to what they say and see if maybe you can get them more involved. Maybe that passion, that desire they have, that anger that they have, they can take that strength, with, as God said to Gideon, take the strength with that to save the Jewish people. And to remember that we are God's people, even under the most sinful circumstances. You can't have a more sinful book than this book. And yet really, Rashi tells us right from the outset, the whole idea of the book is God loves us anyway. It's hard to explain. And somebody tried to curse us, and he stood up for us. And that's Jewish history. That's the book of Hazinu, the story of Hazinu. God says, you guys are going to sin like crazy, but don't worry, I'll save you anyway. Not because God is a vatran, God forbid, that God says, oh, who cares, you can sin, I don't care. God very much cares, very jealous God. But he's also a loving God who can surprise us with his love at times when we least suspect it. So, at this time, Rabbi Jay, if you want to conclude, if you want to open up to questions, whatever you like.
Anybody has any question? If nobody has a comment, which I don't see any, I'll just add one comment if I may. The book of love, that's every book of the Chumash. That's Rashi's comment in each one of the 5 books of the Chumash says that exact point. That Bereshit is why it was this Torah term Bereshit, to give the land of Israel to the Jewish people. Shmot, we know already from Bereshit, Mem Vav. So why Shmot? Rashi also says God loves us, he counts us every moment. Vayikra, he calls onto us, because Vayikra as opposed to Vayikar. And even Sefer Dvarim, where he has to give Musar to the Jewish people, he doesn't do it directly, so he alludes, Ben Tofel, Lavan, V'chatzirot, B'di Zahav. So the entire Torah is a book of love. I just went to then, actually, Marty Lection also mentioned this in one of his classes recently. Heard this from Uriel Simon, I believe, but it's an idea that I was glad that I was mechavein to other people, but I think it's a very, just on the one thing of love, the entire Chumash is really the story of God's love of the Jewish people.
It's a beautiful point, and we have to see that in the historical context, that Rashi, living in a time where Jews were being, burnt alive in the Crusades, tells us, no, you're very beloved. So I think it's very important.
I mean, listen, it's a hard thing theologically. You talked, it's a theological book. I mean, I'm living in a post-Holocaust, generation. I always, I struggle with, even as I say, the Torah is a book of love, I struggle when I say that, and I don't come from a family of survivors. We're here from before the war on both sides. I don't want to, these are tough issues, but, it's a theological issue. But that's how Rashi went to Torah. And you're right, Rashi was almost killed in the Crusades, and anyways, yeah, people don't.
But I would add the following. Every book can be a book of love, but it's most surprising in Bamidbar. Because in the book, it's also a book of sin. In the book of sin, it's also a book of love.
So in a sense, every book is a book of sin. Bereshit, Chedeg, Adam and Eve, as I think, Shmot, Chedegel. But by Yikra, it's interesting, you said Nadav and Avihu.
Yeah, it's true. But it's interesting, in Shmot, there is a minimizing of some sins. Like the very sin of the Slav that the Jews wanted meat, it's presented in Shmot, sort of, it wasn't such a big deal.
Right. Even Moshe hitting the rock in Shmot. Moshe hits the rock in Shmot. All the same, because at that point, God couldn't expect anything from us. We had just mamish left Egypt. This is 40 years later. I mean,
I would also say the book has a different...
Not Meraglim, but after the second half of Bamidbar.
That's definitely possible that it's because of a different stage of history.